Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We're honored to have with us Danae Dobson. She's the daughter of Dr. James Dobson. She and her mom recently wrote a book, and that's going to be the primary topic of our discussion today. But Danae is active and involved in speaking, supporting pro-life causes, other issues important to conservative Americans. She was actually up in Alaska several months ago raising funds for the Crisis Pregnancy Center and was quite successful, raised $70,000 or so. I appreciate, Danae, you being on the Joe Miller Show. Thanks for being on with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. It's my honor.
I have with us also my wife, Kathleen. Kathleen occasionally will show up on the program with us when I twist her arm to do so. She probably would take over, given at least the response that we had last time, because she's very well received. But she's here to talk about your book and a little bit about your views. Your mom and you wrote a book entitled Welcome to Our Table, sharing favorite recipes, inspirational stories, and heartwarming gatherings. You can get that at Amazon. And again, your mom, Shirley, of course, Dobson, and you, Danae Dobson, the authors. And looks like a very interesting book. I'm not exactly Susie Homemaker, but I'm sure that this book has much more than just, the domestic guidance that the title may imply. Tell our audience a little bit about what brought you and your mom to write the book.
Well, I agree with what you said wholeheartedly, because that was not the premise of the book when we began writing it. We really wanted to touch upon the topic of hospitality as it is described in Scripture and what that really means. And if you'll notice, when you're reading the Bible and you go through different sections where it talks about a woman's role, quite often it does mention that we are the keepers of the home. And there's quite a ministry there that isn't always touched upon in the modern day. As we all know, everybody runs at a fast pace. We're all harried and rushed and even stressed at times, and it takes some effort to invite people in. And, this is not the 1950s anymore, but it's such a blessing, and it's so worthwhile to even do something casual, to just exercise and practice that gift of hospitality, bring the spiritual into the otherwise, mundane, and, really show a testimony for the Lord as you serve.
And that's what I so enjoy about, I have not read the book, and so I was excited to come on today to hear about the book, because I'm looking forward to purchasing it as for myself, my older daughters now, and some presents too. I think that it's a beautiful gift. And I think you're so right. The casual part of the welcome to our table is so important. I think that, so many of us, we do get caught up, in the keepers of the home. Our oldest daughter was born in 1989, and I think, if I'm correct, you graduated from college around that time frame, maybe?
I don't always reveal that about myself, but that's a fair guess.
Okay, so my kids, what I was going to get at, my children were raised on so much of your family, basically, and what they wrote. Your Wolf series, you were 12 when you did that series, but
right.
and everything, that your family is just such a blessing to so many, was to us, and to many throughout the world, I'm sure. And this book just brought home, when I heard about it and you being on, I thought, you know what? This is an amazing book, because I had the pleasure of, just the other day, I had 6 of my children. We have 8 total.
Wow.
And I happened to have 6 of my children were in one location, which is rare these days. And so I thought it was Father's Day, actually, and I threw together a last-minute, let's invite my in-laws, and then because my son is, my other sons were there, and his friends from high school were in town. So I said, you know what, let's just put together a last minute, basically, gathering at our home and keep it casual, because it was fun. And it was so interesting to me, and this is what this book evoked, was when I went through, I thought, I haven't made a lemon meringue pie in a very long time, which is one of my son's favorites. So I pulled out the cookbook, and I'm looking through it, and I'm thinking, you know what? I see all these little hand-scribbled do this to make the recipe bigger, because as our family grew, we had to change recipes as we had people come in. And, I have butter smudges here and then maybe tomato sauce or jam on some of the other pages. And it just evoked this feeling of, this is going to be so great. And my kids even talked about how nice it was to do this together. So I think the memories that you are able to do in, with something like your book here are so important in today's day and age. And I think it is a forgotten art. I know that, like I said, I had to go from the, Martha spirit, and I guess, and not just Martha from the Bible, but Martha Stewart, wanting your home back in the day when my kids were growing up to just look and be perfect before you invited anybody over and did anything. And so I think that the concept of your book is more of the casual, way to open your home. And I think as Christians, we forget that if we're able to do this, it's actually a very non-threatening way to bring others into our home, because who doesn't love food?
Right.
And then
so food is really what the whole thing should be based around in terms of a reason to have people over, because I think that if you have something really good to eat, people are going to leave feeling like they had a good time. I attended a Bible study at this guy's house, and we arrived, there were about 8 or 9 of us, and he didn't even have anything for us to drink. And so somebody brought up to him, don't you have any snacks or anything? And he's like, did you guys come here to study the Bible, or did you come here to eat? And it's like, I thought, he just doesn't get it, I mean, there's something about a delicious, snack or something sweet to kind of, lighten the mood, because, good food brings pleasure. And why shouldn't you enhance studying the Word by having wonderful food to eat before or after, or even during?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Especially, I think that you always liked it if, like we didn't have to cook and we could take our kids and say, here we are.
Absolutely. Danae, we've got 2 more segments left. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of your inspirational stories you refer to and the title of the book. We've got about a minute left in this segment. Can you just give us a short snippet of maybe one of those before we go to break?
Well, one of the things that I have coming up that I've done for about 15 years now is I live in California, and I do an annual beach barbecue. And it's mostly for singles, but there are marrieds who come as well. And here's a perfect example of bringing the spiritual into what would otherwise just be a good time. We always have a Campfire Devotional, which is led by a pastor friend, and then bring the whole group together for prayer. And that way people leave spiritually refreshed and not just thinking, oh, I had a great time, jumping in and out of the water and eating. So just bringing that spiritual into the otherwise secular.
Fantastic. Danae Dobson, the daughter of Dr. James Dobson. She and her mom wrote a book. Welcome to our table. You can get it at Amazon. She'll be back with us after these messages. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. This show is made possible by the McPherson Group Tax Defense Attorneys, BeatIRS.com or 1-800-BEAT-IRS. That's BEAT IRS, rescuing Americans from IRS tyranny. They've been defending freedom since '78. Go to them if you have issues. We have online with us Danae Dobson. She's the daughter of Dr. James Dobson. She and her mom have written a book, Welcome to Our Table, sharing favorite recipes, inspirational stories, and heartwarming gatherings. You can get that at Amazon.com. She started with us last segment. If you're just joining us, talking about the book, some of the issues that are facing families and how to improve interaction within the family and become more hospitable. Danae, thank you for staying with us for another segment. One of the things that we were all talking about during the break is how things have really changed with respect to how children, younger generations interact. That seems like that they are glued to their phones and or their computers when they interact, sometimes even at the table. instead of talking to somebody across the table, they'll just simply text them and text back. I mean, it's absolutely crazy how these devices have just kind of vacuumed up any sense of humanity. I mean, we're like technological agents now.
Oh, well, and it's so funny because our oldest children, who are in their 20s now, didn't have those devices. And so when their friends would come over, of course, that was never an issue. And now it's like everybody's like, oh, let's go to the Millers because their mom always has food. Well, wait a minute. Their mom will say, hey, I'm making crepes, but guess what? You're going to all stand around while I'm making them in the kitchen, and we're going to talk, and we're not going to text each other. So I think there might be a pause every once in a while. I'm always happy, though, when they show up and know that there's food in the house, because then we can have some good discussions. But I know a couple of them will go visit the bathroom so that they can do their text messaging and stuff that they need to do. So
Danae, how do you recommend that families address the technological age that we're in that seems to have really displaced normal human interaction, at least as you and I grew up in?
Joe and Kathleen, as you know, this is a huge problem now. I was listening to Dr. Bill Bennett on the radio, and he quoted a statistic that the average young man in his 20s plays video games 4 hours a day. Wow. And obviously that's not time well spent. And so I mentioned this to a guy in his mid-20s, and he started chuckling, and I said, are you in that category? And he goes, well, if you add up the amount of time I spend in the morning and then also at night, it's probably about 4 hours. So I
figured he was going to say it was understated.
I mean, these guys, they're not learning how to be leaders. They're not learning how to be husbands. They're not learning how to be fathers. And, I mean, all of this is just getting out of hand. When I wrote a book for teen girls, I interviewed some youth pastors, and this one youth pastor told me that it's very common for a kid to come into his office for counseling, plop down in the chair in front of him, and just stare at him, expecting him to, draw it out, get the dialogue going,
sure,
get the conversation going, because these kids don't know how to converse. Their entire communication is all in a virtual world. And consequently, they don't learn the art of conversation. So when it comes to mealtime within a family, I really think parents, in particular moms, need to set the tone and say, you know what, no texting at the table. We're going to have a policy in our family, no texting at a restaurant table or within the home. We're going to talk. How was your day?
I agree with that.
Get the ball rolling.
In my house, my children are willing to follow that, and they look at me and they say, Mom, you have to have the same standards.
I knew this was coming. Yeah, I mean, we were talking off break, put the phone down at the dinner table. Come on, I'll never get anything done.
Yes, because
you know what?
Someone in this room is known to have that cell phone glued to his ear 24/7 sometimes.
Well, I'm guilty of fooling around with my phone too much too. But I will tell you though that I actually put my foot down with my own mother, because we were at a restaurant and she's texting away. This was a holiday. I think it was Easter. It was like Easter Sunday. She's texting during our Easter dinner at a restaurant. So I told her,
I'm just telling everyone, have a great, blessed day, and that's what my text is for, because I know I've pulled that a few times. They'll be like, Mom, why aren't you paying attention? I'm like, I'm just telling everybody, blah, blah, blah. Real quick, I'll be off.
Well, I made a little bit of a stink about it, and I haven't seen her do that since. So, she agrees that it's not a good time to start communicating with people that way when, you have others sitting around you in person that you could be communicating with and having a nice time together. So
I'm sure that your dad has looked into this, given his psychological background, but you see this in the modern church, that there now have to be lots of visual inputs to keep people attracted. And the younger generations, because they're engaged with the audio-visual all the time, the video games, the phones, the constant inputs. It's hard, and you mentioned, the kid going in for counseling and just sitting on the couch waiting on the counselor to say something. I mean, there is an expectation of entertainment, and in fact, without it, it seems that it's almost you can't communicate anymore. I mean, it's almost a training process, right, to get people back into what God intended humans to do, and that is actually communicate. I mean, what do you recommend?
Right. I think it's just important to be acutely aware of how much time you are spending in the digital world, because I've been thinking lately that really I probably spend too much time with the texting, the looking stuff up, the emailing, everything that we do with our phones. And I've been thinking that, it might be a good idea if I just maybe put it in a drawer for 2 or 3 hours and just, don't keep looking at it. I read an article that said that our brain chemistry is actually being changed just because we're so distracted. This article said that it had actually dared us to get to the end of the article without being distracted by a text or a phone call on our cell.
I saw that. I saw that article too. And the other thing that I had recently read, and I had a discussion with some of my friends about, was the fact that a lot because we are, so on the technology all the time, when you have to sit down and have your children read a book, or you want to read a book, they don't even know how to use expression properly a lot of times, or they'll get, kind of like they'll just start reading and they forget like what a period means, what a comma might mean, things, because they don't use that anymore. And they're not as engaged. Mm-hmm. Exactly. They're not as engaged to read and to live in, that type of a world either. So some teachers have a lot to say about some of it too. So
right. So this is where parents come in. Those of you who are listening who have young kids and even teenagers at home, I would just encourage you to really put forth a policy within your home in regard to how much time your kids get to spend on the computer and their cell phone. And if they're doing homework, that's one thing, but just to be in their virtual world, it's really not healthy. And I think it makes us better Christians even when we know how to communicate with one another one-on-one and not just, doing it through the e-circuit.
Kathleen probably can recall this, but about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we were getting ready to take a flight out of state. We had to go to some sort of conference or something. And as it always is with our family, it's a rush, because we got so many things going on. We got to make the flight, and it's just, organized chaos, if you will. And I'm in the car going to the airport. We're barely going to make it in time to get our luggage checked. And I realize I'm missing my phone.
Oh, the kids were thrilled. I was excited. We're like, yay!
So,
Dad's total panic mode.
So we keep our oldest home to find the phone, and it actually took him several days to find it. And it really was a blessing because we ended up having, this was at the time, there was a big outage up in Fairbanks, and so he had to be there to help get the generators going and everything else. So all things worked together for good. He eventually found the phone and brought it back. I think I got it 5 days after I'd left. And the first 2 days were extreme panic. It's like, I've got all these clients and I've got all these people, all these issues, political stuff, everything else. What's going to happen? They can't get a hold of me. I mean, the whole way of existence was just dead stop. But, by the 3rd and 4th days, it was absolute bliss.
Really?
I mean, I don't think I've had that level of peace in I don't know how long. But losing that phone gave me 3 days of a throwback to a former era where we didn't have these gadgets. Right. And I loved it.
Yeah. Kind of like when you first go on vacation and you're in work mode still. And, my dad says that too. It takes him 3 days to just be able to unwind to the point where he's actually enjoying having a break and being away on a trip. So. Yep.
Well, we got to go to break. Let's talk more about your book after these messages. Stay with us. The Joe Miller Show. Danae Dobson on with us. And Kathleen Miller. Welcome back to the Joe Miller Show, KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM. We're honored to have with us Danae Dobson, the daughter of Dr. James Dobson. Danae and her mother Shirley have written a book. You can find it at Amazon.com as well as FamilyTalk.org. It's entitled Welcome to Our Table, sharing favorite recipes, inspirational stories, and heartwarming gatherings. It's a book to encourage hospitality, bringing the Lord back into family discussions, hopefully creating a little bit of human character in our interactions. Danae, thanks for staying with us and being willing to talk a little bit more about your book. I wanted to chat just a little bit about something that you brought up during break, that one of the big issues is encouraging, specifically women, to bring hospitality into their home, utilize the home in a way to actually enhance relationship. You want to tell our audience a little bit about how you suggest that's done?
Right. Well, just encouraging your listeners to reach out. It's summertime right now. It's a wonderful opportunity to have friends and family over. Kathleen, you mentioned earlier to me during the break that you just had a big shindig over at your place. And
yes,
so,
just a quick little throw together that turned into a big shindig. So
yeah, lots of people, but it didn't require a lot of, food and, all the hoopla. So, that's always fun to do too, but casual get-togethers can be just as meaningful. And so here we've got 4th of July coming up in a couple days. And so in our family, we have friends coming, and we're going to do barbecue. But we're also going to bring the Lord into our celebration. We will probably read a portion of the Declaration of Independence. I have a political statement that I pulled, an article that I thought everybody would find interesting. We're going to have a time of prayer. We're going to be praying specifically about the Supreme Court's decision. We won't get into that right now, but I know that there are many of you who are grieving, as we are.
yes.
We expected it, but it still knocked us flat when we actually discovered the reality of it. So we'll be praying about that. But, just bringing the Lord into our celebrations. And so, here we are. It's summertime. Have people over. Practice the gift of hospitality, which we are instructed to do in Scripture. And you'll enjoy it just as much.
That's a good point. Not to interrupt, but I think many people forget that that instruction in Scripture to practice the gift of hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's an important point, so thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's a non-judgmental way to really love people and share your faith, and I think really make a difference in other people's lives, not only, in your own family as well. Like I said, when I was having our Father's Day last minute little get together, and I was going through the cookbook, and so many memories over the years are in that cookbook from, like I said, the smudges and the writings and stuff. And the kids that came back that are now also in their 20s that were there when they were little, they were all like, it's been such a long time since we've done this. And it just brought a flood of basic just love, and you just feel good from that. And,
yeah. And you as the host or hostess will also be blessed as a result of doing something for the Lord, bringing glory to Him, blessing your friends and family members with delicious food and a great time. And I've found that people tend to open up more when they're sitting around a table in a home than they would be otherwise at a restaurant. It just creates more of an intimate environment where people feel like they can be a little bit more candid and maybe even share about their struggles or ask for prayer. A restaurant just doesn't really, you've got servers singing happy birthday, you've got noise and racket and babies and, other obstacles. So there is a real opportunity for ministry within the home. And I would just encourage everybody to step it up a little bit. And I know we're all busy and we all have responsibilities, and it does take some time and effort, but it's so worth it. And
I was going to mention the busyness of life is one of the biggest barriers, it seems, to that kind of interaction. And, of course, the busyness of life also leaves, your house maybe not necessarily the state that you want to show it to others in. What do you recommend on both of those factors, the busyness and then, of course, the impact on the house and whether or not it's ready for guests to come in?
Yes, that whole Martha, as I call it, both Martha's in Scripture and Martha Stewart syndrome.
Yeah, we're revealing a little bit of the personal aside here.
We talked about you having your cell phone
right.
glued to your ear. It's
Back
okay
on you,
for
Kathleen.
everyone to know my struggles. It's all right. It's all good.
Well, I can relate to that, but you know what? I can speak for myself in saying that people really don't care whether you live in a mansion or a hovel. They just want to want to spend time with you. I mean, it's the company that really makes the difference. And I think if you just have the beds made and the floors nice, people aren't going to give your furniture the white glove test. I mean, and
the bathrooms cleaned.
Yeah, wipe the bathrooms down.
Right.
Please do that. But
I've relaxed now that I'm a grandmother with three grandchildren. I've relaxed over the years. The children tell me that anyway.
Oh, well, that's I've had other people tell me that too. That when they were young moms, like they felt like everything had to be perfect, and now that they've raised their kids and they've gone through different stages of life, it's like just come over and enjoy, and they don't feel like they have to have every little dust ball picked up.
Right. And it's interesting because I share that with my children. I tell my girls, it's like, it's okay. Just enjoy. Enjoy your children, enjoy your friends. The other thing that I think is going to be important and why I am so looking forward to purchasing this book and sharing it with my daughters and my friends is I think that we're coming to a day and age where having this type of fellowship is going to be what might actually basically save somebody. And I mean that in the sense of they're going to need an outlet from this, like we were talking in the last segment, this crazy technological world that we live in. Mm-hmm. Maybe they've got questions because of like all the craziness that's going on and things changing so much, and you just get bombarded with just all bad news, this, that, and the anger and hostility that's going on. And I think that your book is going to offer a respite from that. And I think that's going to become important. I think we're going into a day and age that we're going to see where this is going to be a real blessing to us to have this type of, ability to share that hospitality.
An oasis
an
oasis in the sea of chaos, right?
Yes. Well, and I think even with the Supreme Court's decision, I feel a lot more bonded to my Christian friends as a result of this. I mean, as devastating as it is, Christians are really banding together now and, really kind of leaning on one another. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, we're set apart as God's holy people, and we've got to step it up now. This is not the time to be cowardly. This is the time that, we need to make our voices heard even more. And, we need to make a decision within our own hearts that we're not going to back down. Winston Churchill, never, never, never give up.
Right.
We're going to press on and still continue to try to make a difference because the enemy, and I'm talking about Satan, he wants us to just give up, like throw our hands up in the air and say, well, we've done all this work and look what good it's done, nothing. And that's not true. Every now and then we do win a battle for righteousness.
That dovetails directly with what we were talking about on this program before you came on. There was an article that came out in Time magazine written by a supposed conservative Christian suggesting that now is the time to withdraw, go into your communes. The only thing you can do is protect your families, ensure that they aren't impacted adversely by this bad culture. Mm-hmm. The reality is, I agree 100% with you, Danae. Now is the time to double down and fight. We cannot stay silent. In fact, not only is that not scriptural to back down and not, engage, but in addition to that, it's a certainty that will lead to the path of even increased persecution in the future. So I appreciate that message. We only have just a few seconds left. I just wanted to remind our audience, Danae Dobson, daughter of Dr. James Dobson, and her mom, Shirley Dobson, have written the book, Welcome to Our Table, sharing favorite recipes, inspirational stories, and heartwarming gatherings. You can get it at Amazon.com, FamilyTalk.org. Appreciate, Danae, you being on the program. And thank you, Kathleen, my beautiful wife, for joining us for these three segments.
My pleasure. Thanks, Danae.
Thank you. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. We've got Rebecca Kiesling rebroadcast coming up next, and I'll be back with you at 2 to 4 p.m. Monday through Thursday. Stephen Crowder tomorrow.